All right. Does that look okay?
Yes.
Stop share. And did that do it? Did that get rid of it?
It's gone. Yes.
Okay. It's weird because when I hit stop share, I still got the PowerPoint up on the slide in this presentation mode. That's weird. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. I feel better now. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm going to jump off and come back on, I guess, at 6:30. So.
Okay.
All right. Awesome.
Hey, Markeith.
Hello.
Hi, Markeith.
Hi, Sabrina. How are you?
I'm good. So you can hear me?
I can.
Like you're going to have to hear me, but anyway, hopefully not. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
So it's super noisy, but
How you doing, Mayor?
I am good. How are you?
I'm well.
I'm not squeaky.
Nope.
Okay. I don't know why it does that, but sometimes it just does.
2 for 2 the past 2 meetings.
Yeah. Oh, yay. I'll just share with you, and I think Amy Harvey's there. We are considering staying virtual for June 8th and June 15th. At this point, we'll make a decision next week, probably.
Okay.
Just have a lot of COVID things going around us, all around us. Yeah, Amy's shaking her head.
Yeah.
And I don't know, have you received any complaints about us being virtual? I haven't. So we might as well just finish out this season and see where we are.
Yeah.
I've been talking to council members and they're kind of like,
And yeah, other than a notice from the local high school, the numbers are up.
I was at Smith Middle School helping do awards today, and they all were masked up big time. So, and I thought that was, I didn't know. I mean, I was just like surprised, but they were like students, faculty, everybody masked. So, yeah. All right, I'll turn my, so you don't have to listen to my music.
How you doing, John and Sammy?
Doing all right. I think my little neighbor child is about to ring my doorbell until I come answer it. So I'm going to attend to that. His name's Antonio. He's my hero. But I think he would find this meeting dreadfully boring. Nothing against the conversation, but he's 9. So
Oh, yeah.
I will attend to that for a second.
How you doing, Ty?
How's it going?
Oh, living my best life. Well, let's see if this works. All right, there we go. Oh my. I'm wearing blue on blue. This is a sin. Hi, John.
How's it going?
Good, good. How you doing?
Okay. Nice background.
Oh, thank you. Brings me back to the good old days.
Me too.
All right, I'm gonna go off camera, Mayor Heminger, because I'm finishing up dinner, but I'm here.
How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm well. And your mic sounds good. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Morris. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Glad to be with you.
Glad to have you.
Oh, yeah. How you
Good
doing,
evening,
Paris?
everyone.
Hello.
5 minutes.
Hi, Markeith. Good to see you.
Good to
Well,
see
not
you.
see you, but hear you.
Oh, I'm right here.
Awesome. Good to see you.
You too.
All right. I got to feed my boy something really quick. He's like fussing. Let me make him a plate. I'll be right back.
All right. How you doing, Lance?
4 minutes.
We're slow to get on board tonight. Usually we got right here earlier than this, but it's all good. Michael, Ty, and Paris, we'll just carry it on.
Hey, we're not voting, so we don't need a quorum, right?
Oh, it'd be nice to have one. Want everyone to hear these
3 minutes.
items.
Do folks think it's at 7? Or are they at the library thinking it's in person?
They're pretty aware it's virtual.
Yeah, I don't think anybody thinks anything is in person these days.
Yeah.
it's, at least speaking for myself, it's much more likely I'll think something is virtual and forget to show up for an in-person meeting.
Well, this could be the smallest and shortest in a while. I was thinking back to 2 years ago when we had 72 students sign up to speak in May on the defund police item. And they were very engaged.
Yes, I was calling all the names.
All right, Michael, will you start texting some of our colleagues, please?
Okay.
I think it's 7. I don't know.
How you doing, Mary?
Good. How are you?
Fine.
I'm good. And hello, Lauren.
Oh, it was Mary Jane. You said. I think you said Mary. Okay,
Hi,
Mary.
Marquise. Hi, everyone. Good evening. He's doing his mic check.
Yeah. 'John, thank you for being willing to change the order. I thought it'd be better for you guys knowing when you would start versus waiting to figure out when it would go on.
Actually, that was an easy one.
Good, good. Well, I meant for that to happen originally. I don't know.
Evening, everyone.
Got our signals crossed. Hello, Camille, are you with us there?
I am.
Good. Hello, Maurice.
How are you?
Okay. 3, 4, 5, 6. Missing Karen.
30 seconds.
Oh, Adam's there, okay.
Hello. There we go. Thank you. All right.
We're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 25th Chapel Hill Town Council work session. We're glad to have you join us tonight, and whether you're watching virtually or going to watch it later or streaming, we're glad to have you along. It is a work session, so this is where council dives deeper into some issues and has some discussion. And we have 2 items on the agenda tonight. Tonight, we'll be talking about the work of the Lower Brooker Creek working group, the things they've been working on. They're going to present to us, and we'll explore and evaluate some ideas and then figure out the path forward. And then we are continuing our budget discussions and deliberations. If there's time at the end of the meeting, we'll allow for public comment. We do like to hear from you, but in a work session, we don't hold public comment at the end of each item. There are many ways to communicate with us. You are welcome to email or call or bump into us at the grocery store, whatever works for you. And there will be another budget work session perhaps on June 1st, and then we look to vote on June 8th on the budget. So just an update on that. Several council members asked that I make a statement on gun violence tonight. And this is just in wake of the recent shootings, including the tragic events in Buffalo last week, Buffalo, New York, and then Uvalde, Texas this week. It's just, I don't know how many times I've had to say our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to the families and communities, but this is unacceptable. This is not okay. I had 2 high school students write me and say, how are you going to keep us safe in our own community? What are we doing? How do I know that my younger brother won't be, as I leave high school, that he won't be attacked in, where he's going to school? How do we live with this? And I agree with him. It's just, it's not enough to say our hearts and prayers go out to these folks. And it's really frustrating, to be honest with you, because it is so unacceptable that our own state won't allow us as a town or a county to prohibit the carrying of guns and to even do the background checks, any of those things. We have some wonderful groups that we stand with. Mothers Demand Action. They petition and go to the state legislature all the time, just trying to get some sensible gun safety laws passed. Background checks being one, red flag being another, and prohibiting ghost guns being another. And these are sensible. I have personally talked to our senators, our current senators, and they are not supportive of these measures. And that's just, it's unacceptable. So we need more people to reach out to our own senators and to the senator candidates from our state and to our representatives. Although the House of Representatives has actually passed some of these laws, it's stalled over in the Senate. And the Democratic Municipal Officials Organization today made a statement. It was long, I'll just summarize, but the main one was, there's no reason that a nation already scarred by Sandy Hook, Parkland, and countless other children dead from firearms should continue to endure these tragedies. And they're right, we shouldn't. This is ridiculous. It's unacceptable. So anyway, we want people to stand up, reach out, express themselves, call the senators. Like I said, call the senator-elects and keep moving forward. I will remind you that next week on June 3rd, which is Friday, is National Gun Violence Awareness Day. We put up the orange flag and have a ceremony at the post office, but we ask everyone to wear orange. We'll be asking council members to wear orange to our economic sustainability meeting so that we can show our support for this movement. So anyway. All right, in keeping with,
Mayor?
yes, ma'am.
Sorry, could I just share, I don't know if there's anything more local, but tomorrow at 5:30, there is a vigil in Raleigh at 5:30 at Bicentennial Plaza, focused on gun violence, gun control.
Thank you. Our local coordinator is out of town right now, and she regrets that she's not here to help organize some of these events for us. It is a wonderful group. If you're interested in Moms Demand Action, we have a wonderful group here in Chapel Hill. We can connect you if you reach out and let us know. In keeping with the rules for virtual meetings, we have to do a roll call. I will say that council members Jess Anderson and Amy Ryan are asked to be excused. They'll not be joining us this evening. So when I call your name, please say aye or here or whatever works for you. And we will move forward. Mayor Pro Tem Karen Stegman.
Here.
Councilmember Camille Berry.
Here.
Councilmember Ty Wynn.
Present.
Councilmember Paris Miller Fouché.
Here.
Councilmember Michael Parker.
Here.
Councilmember Adam Searing.
Here.
And the mayor is here as well. Thank you. We do have a proclamation and some announcements, but our first proclamation is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we're going to have Ty and Camille join us on this. And if you will read out the proclamation, we appreciate it.
Sounds good. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, in celebration and recognition of the contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to our community and our nation, the Chapel Hill Town Council is pleased to join with the jurisdictions across the country in proclaiming May 2022 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Chapel Hill is proud to be home to a large Appy population that contributes greatly to the enrichment and prosperity of our community. During this month, we wish to celebrate the contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to our community, our country, and the world.
We also wish to use this time to raise awareness of anti-Asian hate crimes and to demonstrate solidarity with the Appy community, turning grief and injustice into activism, inclusions, and joy. Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander, AA and HPI communities represent a multitude of ethnicities, languages, and experiences. Therefore, during this month and through this year, we encourage everyone to learn more about these various cultures and to show appreciation for the contributions that our Asian American and Pacific Islander individuals make to our town and society as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you for helping us raise awareness, and we hope to have some events and celebrate, but raising awareness is so important. And we have a wonderful growing AAPI community here in Chapel Hill who contribute very much to our community and our diversity and our everything. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Okay, I have a few announcements. Sorry, here we go. Last week, we cut the ribbon for the new Boys and Girls Club. It was wonderful. The town has given the building, not in ownership, but in use over in the Northside neighborhood for the Boys and Girls Club. There have been renovations. It looks fabulous. And they have a home now that works. And they were showing us all the different things going on a video. Because of COVID, we didn't go inside. But it was truly amazing. Very proud of our town for partnering to make this happen for so many of our youth in our community of all ages. And it was wonderful to behold as this program has really grown and helped so many children in our community. So that was wonderful. And then today, Camille and I joined Chair Price at the Smith Middle School awards assembly for, get this, 7 Smith Middle School kids won C-SPAN awards for producing videos out of over, what'd she say, 30,000 some number, was 150 winners. How many? 1,500?
Thereabout, yes.
It was amazing. And so they had to look at all those. And then they selected 150 winners. 7 of them were from Smith Middle School, and 1 was from East Chapel Hill High, where the student had actually also won when she was back at Smith Middle School. So it was fascinating. Their videos are wonderful. The theme was, how does the federal government affect you? Some of us did some interviews. Ty, you were featured on one of the winning videos. That was fun to see. But just what a great accomplishment. And we encourage these young folks to stay engaged, to learn more about their government and how it affects them, and to get involved, maybe work in government, because government is people. So it was a wonderful event. Next Monday for Memorial Day, Council Member Michael Parker will be presenting a proclamation on behalf of Orange County's Peace Coalition Annual Memorial Day Program. The event will be on Zoom this year. It'll take place from 3 to 4:30 p.m. And thank you, Michael, for doing this again for us this year. We appreciate it. It's an important event to be at. So thank you. The council has 2 meetings scheduled for next week. One on Wednesday, June 1st, 6:30 p.m. is a council work session. And then on Friday, June 3rd, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. is our economic sustainability. And again, we'll send a reminder to have you wear orange. This will also be these both will be virtual meetings as we move forward. Does anyone else have announcements? All right, then we will move forward with the first item on our agenda. And we have with us some members of the Lower Booker Creek Working Group to present with us and the important work that they've been doing. So we welcome you and thank you for coming, and thank you for being flexible and coming on this date. We appreciate it.
Good evening. Let's see. Is it better to have the screens showing right now, or hold it off for a little while?
It's good to have it up. People have something to look at, and you can tell us. Okay.
Okay. Good evening. I'm John Morris. I'm serving as co-chair of the working group for the Booker Creek effort. And I've appreciated being able to take part in this undertaking, and I'm happy to be able to report to you tonight. It's a very detailed subject, and I've been struggling with how to cover it in about 15 minutes. I'll do my best. And then after I get through with that, I'll be glad to try to answer your questions. The history of this effort is that the council had approved 7 floodwater storage projects in Booker Creek to reduce flood damages. And after public comments, the council disapproved these projects, basically for 2 reasons: that the benefits and cost had not been adequately demonstrated, and then second, that the environmental damages of these projects had not been accounted for or considered. Mayor Heminger created a working group to recommend some new approaches to stormwater management. And just in preparation for this meeting, just a couple of days ago, we received a question from a council member. So here's the question. What criteria are you using to evaluate your recommendations? And how does this compare to the criteria used to evaluate the flood storage projects? That's an excellent question, and it's a good place to start our discussion. There are 2 ways to evaluate flood damage reduction projects. One is by looking at the benefits and costs. That's an economic evaluation. And then the second is by looking at environmental impacts to weigh those. Okay, the costs are pretty straightforward. That's just the land, materials, and construction that it would cost to build a flood control project. The project benefits are reduction in flood damages. That's what the benefits are. So let's just look at an example to get a feel for how this works. Take, for example, a flood-prone area that has houses and businesses in it, and say that you have a certain amount of flooding that occurs now, say a 25-year flood. And then if you build a flood control project that reduces that 25-year flood elevation by 1 foot, that's a benefit. But how much benefit? Well, it depends on which foot that is. If you have a store that's flooded 3 feet deep, there's a huge amount of damage to furniture, merchandise, sheetrock, flooring, etc. It's a disaster. If that's reduced 1 foot to 2 feet, it's not a big benefit because most of the same damage still occurs. But if you have a store that's flooded 6 inches deep and you reduce that 1 foot, that's a huge benefit because you have no damages then, you have no flooding. So this is one of the key things that has to be taken into account to specifically determine the benefits of a project. Of course, we have flooding that occurs, all sizes of floods, and they occur on an unpredictable basis. And so what we do to measure flood damages is that we calculate average annual flood damage reduction, and that's based on the statistical likelihood of various levels of flooding occur in the future. So reduction in average annual benefits. How did the town's consultant, W.K. Dixon, evaluate the cost and benefits of these proposed flood storage projects? Well, their report, it's a massive thing. It's quite a few volumes. And after combing through it, I don't find any information in there on the amount of damage that occurs to businesses and homes. And I don't find any information on how much the damages would be reduced by the proposed projects. So that's a very surprising omission from a study of this type. The Dixon report does describe their benefits in some ways. Here's an example. Take the North Lakeshore Drive Bridge, which goes across Booker Creek just upstream from Eastwood Lake. The 25-year storm floods that bridge and road by about 0.51 feet. So that's a serious public health problem. You know, it's a danger to traffic and it blocks the road. There are 3 of these proposed flood storage projects upstream from this point at an estimated cost of $9.8 million. And so these 3 projects would reduce the 25-year flood elevation by 1/10 of a foot. So it would go from about 1/2 foot to 4/10 of a foot. That's not really a significant benefit. The road would still be blocked and the public danger would be the same. Let's look at Willow Drive, which is way down at the bottom end of the Booker Creek watershed. There are 26 properties in that area that are within the 25-year floodplain. And the proposed Willow Drive flood storage project, which is the most expensive of all 7 projects at $4.6 million, it also has the highest environmental cost, would remove only 3 of those 26 properties from the 25-year floodplain. That seems like a very modest investment, modest benefit for such a big investment.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Excuse me. Oh, Mayor Heminger just answered us. We were curious if the slide should be going in tandem with what you're saying, but she said not yet.
Yeah, no.
Please continue. We thought we might be missing some slides that you were sharing, but not yet.
No, I'd intended to start those later, but so I'll just press ahead, okay?
Thank you.
What we're seeing right now is a very scenic view of the culvert underneath Eastgate Shopping Center. which happens to be built right on top of Booker Creek. Okay, let's look at Eastgate Shopping Center, which has experienced many episodes of flood damages over the many years it's been in place. The Elliott Storage Project, which is the only one of the 7 that's been completed, is targeted to benefit Eastgate. The town staff says that the Elliott project will reduce the 25-year flood elevation by about 1 foot at the Franklin Street Bridge. Our working group asked, how is the flood elevation reduced at the various locations within Eastgate, the various stores? Of course, the Franklin Street Bridge is a big constriction in the floodplain. And so downstream, it appears that the reduction in flood elevations would be less than 1 foot. The town's response was that they would have to do some additional modeling to determine this. And so we really don't know how much flood damage reduction benefits this project would provide at Eastgate Shopping Center. The other side of the benefit cost calculation of cost is the cost side. And the Elliott project was predicted to cost $1.1 million. That's the amount that was estimated when the council approved the project. The cost of the project as constructed is $2.6 million, and that leaves out the approximate $600,000 that was invested in recreation benefits such as the walking paths. So the project cost multiplied by 2.3 times. And of course, you can't really do a good economic evaluation of a project unless you have a more reliable cost estimate than that. What about the other 6 proposed projects that haven't yet been built? The Dixon report did only a very preliminary overview of these projects, but the report is candid in identifying issues that might greatly increase the cost for these projects or prevent them from being built at all, such as having to get land rights from other parties or move major utility lines. So it's really not safe to assume that these 6 projects could be constructed at anything like the $20 million cost estimated, or that some of them could be constructed at all. Another project cost is the environmental damage, which I mentioned before. And these projects entail considerable environmental damage or costs, particularly loss of climate benefits of about 50 acres of mature forest and loss of valuable wildlife and aquatic habitat. The Dixon report did not document these losses for consideration by the council, and their priority setting weighting system did not give any weight to environmental losses. My conclusion about the proposed flood storage projects is that first, they achieve a modest reduction in floodwater levels at some places. They do not, quote, solve the flooding problem, end quote. Second, the benefits and costs are not documented in a way that would allow us to determine whether they're economically justified or not. And then third, significant environmental damage is not accounted for or considered. I'm keeping an open mind on these projects because it's possible that we may develop better evaluation of cost and benefits and then really be able to see what that balance is. If the council ever does want to reconsider these 6 projects, I really encourage you to get a good estimate of project benefits and costs so you can be sure that any expenditure is justified and that you document and consider environmental costs. Let's go on now to review what is working, what the working group has accomplished. So could we go on to the next slide? Thank you. So these are the members of our working group. We've got a very diverse group, and members of the group have quite a varied kind of experience, all of which is relevant to our task in one way or the other. We've also gotten some very valuable help from the town. Lauren Clark, Lance Norris, Chris Roberts, and Sammy Bauer have attended all of our meetings and given us very effective support in scheduling and carrying out our virtual meetings. Sammy Bauer has done an excellent job of creating a website on the Booker Creek Working Group. And so if any council members want to find out in more detail what we've done and what we do in the coming months, please take a look at that. It's got a wealth of information on it, including all the people who have spoken to our group. So thank you very much to the town representatives for that help. Mayor Heminger has given us a charge as we started our work. And so here are some of the key points right here. I'd like to call attention to the second bullet in particular. How can we reduce flooding during big storm events? And what we're urging is that we interpret that as how can we reduce flood damages during big storm events? Because we're going to make the case that that's the real target we need to focus on. And as we go along through these tentative recommendations, you'll see that we made our best effort to respond to all these points in the charge. How did we approach our charge? We looked for innovative strategies, policies and programs that would respond to the charge. We wanted to find measures that were proven successful in practice. So we've invited a number of representatives of neighboring communities in North Carolina to come speak to us, and we've had some very stimulating talks. After discussing these new ideas, we've adopted some tentative recommendations. And if we could go on to the next slide. So these are the tentative recommendations that we reached up to now. The first one is a green infrastructure grant program. And this would provide grants to homeowners to cover part of the cost of small green infrastructure projects on their property, such as rain gardens, disconnecting downspouts from roofs, cisterns, and stream bank stabilization, plus many others. This responds to the mayor's charge of finding ways to get people involved in better stormwater management on their own property. This program operates very successfully in Durham and also in Mecklenburg County. And the primary benefits are improved stormwater quality and reduced stream bank erosion. Let's remember that the goals of the Chapel Hill Stormwater Program include water quality and protection of natural stream corridors, in addition to reducing flood damages. So we want to make sure that we consider all of those goals. We're recommending in connection with this first bullet, a stream bank stabilization demonstration project. We refer to it here as habitat restoration. These are some very innovative, inexpensive techniques that have been developed over at NC State University and other places that allow us to go in with some very innovative green measures and reduce stream bank erosion. This both reduces sediment in the streams, which is an environmental damage, and it also helps protect the property of homeowners. The next project is, we called it Cost-Effective Flood Damage Reduction Program. This is one I'm particularly excited about. This program would greatly increase the town's effectiveness and its cost effectiveness in reducing flood damages to homes and businesses. It has two key features. First, it focuses on flood damage reduction, not just flood control. It identifies specific homes and businesses to target for solution, those homes and businesses that are subject to flood risk. Second, it considers a wider range of flood damage reduction measures for each structure to choose the most cost-effective approach. Some of these measures are property acquisition, relocating a property, elevation of structures, dry and wet floodproofing, small flood walls, and elevating heating and air conditioning equipment. Frequently, these measures are extremely cost-effective in reducing flood damage. This program has been highly developed in Mecklenburg County, and what they do is they develop these measures for the target structures that they're concerned with. They rank them according to cost effectiveness and also by some public safety factors, and then choose the best projects to put in their annual capital budget. Our next tentative recommendation is protection of bottomland forests. Bottomland forests, that is forests that are growing in low areas next to streams, provide many valuable ecosystem services, such as slowing and infiltrating floodwater, sequestering carbon to mitigate climate change, providing wildlife and aquatic habitat, and providing opportunities for walking trails and wildlife observation. The town owns a number of these properties, and we recommend that they be considered for permanent protection through conservation easements and land use planning, and that the town consider acquiring some additional bottomland forests to create unbroken forest corridors that would be very valuable for wildlife habitat and for water quality. So those are the ones that we have worked our way through and put in the tentatively approved category. There's some other things on our plate that we're going to be evaluating in the next couple of meetings. These are these potential recommendations. And I guess in the interest of time, I'm not going to try to summarize all these. That could go on forever. But I'll try to respond to questions on any of these if you have a particular interest. So what's next for the working group? We have 2 more meetings scheduled in June, and we'll be working our way through some of the these additional recommendations that you see on the screen. At our June 6th meeting, we're going to tackle the first 2 items. During the summer break, we'll be working on pulling our recommendations into a coherent whole that we can bring back to you in the fall. What we hope to provide is some creative, productive ideas that have proved successful in North Carolina communities. We won't be able to provide you complete program plans with all the budget and organizational details worked out. We haven't tried to do that. We're just trying to find you some very practical, good ideas that have proven successful in North Carolina. We encourage you to review our recommendations and consider them in the light of your priorities and your budget constraints, and then move forward with some significant improvements. We're enthusiastic about what we've accomplished in the working group up to now, and we're convinced that our recommendations can point the way to some significant improvements in Chapel Hill stormwater management. So I'm going to stop at that point, and I'll be glad to try to answer your questions that you may have.
Thank you, John. Can we come back to full screen, please, Sammy? Thank you. John, I first wanted to say thank you to you and Pamela Schultz, and I think Jeanette Bench is the other vice chair, and all the members of the committee. You took this charge seriously. You've worked very diligently. You've pulled folks together. You've pulled in subject matter experts. Like I said, I've listened to almost all your meetings. I've got 1 or 2, I think, to catch up on. And we're really pleased with the work you've been able to bring us back. I want to say thank you to the staff as well. I know they've been engaged, and I know they've had some staffing challenges recently too. And so I think the timing actually was good. It helped us understand better. You guys have been asking great questions. We looked at it differently now, and I think that was a good reason to pull this group together. And I hope you'll all be willing to continue on, because I think there's more work that actually needs to be done before any decisions are made as we look forward with this. So appreciate that a lot. So we will, and thank you. That was a great presentation, and you kept it very concise, which is a complicated topic. So appreciate that as well. So council members, do you have questions? Michael?
I don't know that this is a question for John. It may be more of a question for our staff. So, once the group has submitted its report, how do we then, what's the process by which we actually make decisions about what happens next, right? So we had a range of projects, we put those on hold. We're going to get, but I expect will be valuable recommendations from this working group. What's the process for translating that into action?
So I'll take a first stab at that and ask Lance to jump in as well, Councilmember Parker. Our thinking is that once they present the report to the council, the final report to the council later this fall, that we would be referred back to the mayor and the council and the mayor and the manager, and we would provide our staff response and also do some evaluation by our staff and come back to you with our staff recommendations, and probably continue to consult with the committee as well, just to make sure that we're clear about their recommendations, and then come back with our recommendation after that.
Okay, I saw Adam had his hand up. Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. So the first one is, could you give a little more detail or background, John, on the Green Infrastructure Grant Program? That seemed interesting. Then I have another question after that, but I'm interested in that program particularly.
Sure. One of our working group members is Michael Dupree, who worked for the city of Durham, actually Durham County, for quite a few years, managing a program exactly like this. And so he's been the advocate for it and has given us some real detailed descriptions of how it works. So it can have several different aspects depending on which way the town would want to go with it. In Durham, it has these matching grants for homeowners to help them do things like put in rain gardens or cisterns, or one of the most beneficial and popular measures they have is to allow the stream to get back into its floodplain. And that sometimes involves, if you have a steep bank that's eroded out by a stream, to flatten that steep bank back to make it more a gradual slope so that the stream can naturally flood into the floodplain at high waters. And so that reduces erosion because you stabilize that bank with vegetation. And it also provides more storage for floodwater in that segment of the stream. And so that slightly reduces downstream flooding. So those are some of the benefits of those projects. They've done some very innovative things in Durham. One of them is to involve the schools. And so they have had some of the school teachers have been involved, and they've used these projects to instruct their students about stormwater management and environmental management. And then some of the high school students have actually been employed to help implement the projects. It's a very creative thing that they brought about over there. And so it can go in different directions depending on how much you want to elaborate on this basic concept. And again, it's very important to remember the official goals of the Chapel Hill Stormwater Program include improving stormwater quality and protecting and preserving natural stream corridors, which this program addresses. And so those two are important goals, along with reducing flood damage.
Great. Yeah, no, that's helpful. And this just leads me to my other question, which is, you have that recommendation, a few others, and when I was going through the materials, I was sort of wanting more detail in all those. And I know we've had some staffing challenges with this, and I'm wondering if you all need a little more help with this. Like, is there some way we can add a little more staff time, or some of our consulting folks, or I don't know what it is, but it might be that we could. I guess I'm just saying I might want a little more detail as y'all move forward. So, and I know that we have problems with that, so I'm wondering if that would be helpful.
Well, I'll just say that we've set as our goal not to try to produce complete polished program plans and budgets, but to produce some of these good ideas that are fleshed out enough to really communicate them. One thing that we have mentioned to the town staff that we would like is to have a small amount of assistance from a very knowledgeable, experienced consultant, just to look over our recommendations and kind of give us a technical reality check. That would be very helpful to us. And I don't think it would amount to a lot of cost, but it would probably greatly improve the quality of our product.
Anyone else? I have a couple questions. Again, I just want to say thank you. I'm really pleased with, I know you have some more work to do. I know there was going to be some work on the subcommittee over the summer as well. I look forward to that. I was going to build off what Adam just said. I was thinking that we could look into some interns. We've had great luck with our interns coming from graduate programs at UNC who could help us figure out some better ways. And Sammy, if you're still there, I think some videos would be really great to show people how to do the project disconnect, how to put in a cistern, what to think about, how to do a small, I won't say stream restoration, but how to help your own property do better during stormwater, and share those videos with the community, especially on some neighborhood listservs. And I know you love to do videos, but I do think that it would help move folks along, because we're not staffed up enough to coordinate doing the giving out of that kind of equipment at this point in time. But you know, a spreader really is like $10 over at Lowe's that people could go get for project disconnect. And other things are a little more expensive, but we could figure out some ways to show people what, and then figure out if there is a path forward for some grants from the town, from our stormwater funds to do some of these programs. But we've had great luck with interns evaluating, doing research, helping with videos, doing all those kinds of things. I throw that idea out there. And then I throw this other idea that we're looking at now. I learned a new word, chicane. It's those interventions into the street to both slow down traffic, but also allow some green infrastructure. So it's a little island pushed off the side, leaving enough room for bikes to go through, but it forces the street to be narrower as cars are coming through. So it slows traffic down, because we're all going to have to move away from the speed tables because they're harming trucks and buses. And so we're looking for other ways to slow down traffic, but also put some green infrastructure in. So I don't know if we can use stormwater monies for those things, but it's something new and a collaboration with our speed reduction programs and better safety in the town. So I think that could be an interesting, we've called them bump outs before, but because there's a gap between the sidewalks. So anyway, I know John's familiar with all these terms. He's worked a long time in water resources and knows this stuff backwards and forwards. But anyway, well, thank you for this report out. I know it's taken longer than we originally predicted, but I think there was so much to learn and to go over. And I love the background and the experience and the broad spectrum of experience that this working group has had to come together, and diversity. It's got people from different areas and all kinds of different parts of town. And I think that's really wonderful. I'm glad Mr. Dupree was willing to work along as well, since he's in Durham and we couldn't really appoint him. So thank you for that too. So, all right, well, we'll look forward to hearing back again. Ms. Clark or Mr. Norris or Mr. Jones, did you have anything to add? Or Sammy? Sorry, Ms. Bauer.
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we look for the work to continue to learn more. And we look for ways of these practical solutions, and some policy changes, I think, too, are part of this. I think you were looking at our policies as we have been looking at our policies as well.
Well, we really appreciate the opportunity to take this on. We do, as you said, we have many different talents represented on the working group, and everyone has gotten an oar in the water in some fashion or another. So we'll keep going, and we appreciate the opportunity to make this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great. Okay. All right. And council members, please check out the website. It does have some really great information on there. So. All right. Our next item up is continued discussion on the proposed 2022-2023 fiscal year budget.
Thank you, Mayor.
22, 23.
Yes, 22, 23. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Reese Jones, Town Manager. And this evening, we will provide you with an update on the budget, and we'll also spend some time working with you to address a couple of significant requests that are still outstanding. The total proposed budget is nearly $128 million, with the general fund accounting for roughly $76.5 million. So here are a few of the new investments that were included in the recommended budget and have been tweaked a bit over the course of the last month. We have a pay adjustment for our employees. We have a reserve fund to help address compression issues within the organization. 4 new positions are included in the proposed budget: a grants administrator, a new position in our DEI office, a new planning technician in the planning department, and an administrative coordinator in economic development. We have an additional $80,000 in climate action. That's in addition to the $470,000 that we have in this year's budget. It's a total of $550,000 for next year. We have another $118,000 to add to our annual allocation for affordable housing issues. We have offered a 3% escalator for our funding for our human services agencies. And we have an extra $100,000 in the budget to assist with the downtown partnerships work in our downtown on Franklin Street and beyond. We're also offering $125,000 in new funding to address bike and pedestrian safety, another $40,000 for the cultural arts. That's $20,000 of that could be designated for nonprofits, and the other $20,000 could be used for the town of Chapel Hill's cultural arts programming. We have $50,000 in for parks maintenance, a little over $95,000 for annual vehicle replacements, and $160,000 to address the increase in cost of doing business for the town of Chapel Hill. The inflation that you're seeing all over the place is affecting us as well. And we have nearly $100,000 in to assist with our cybersecurity efforts. So here are a few of the adjustments that we've made since we first presented the budget based on the feedback that we received from the council. The proposed property tax rate is 52.2 cents. That is a 0.8 cent increase to go towards the transit tax to help fund transit next year. We've added the Economic Development Administrative Coordinator's position that I mentioned before. We removed a compensation analyst position. And we have now begun, we began this discussion with council last week on how to best address the requests that we have received from both IFC and the Partnership to End Homelessness. So here are a few of the details of those requests. IFC has asked area municipalities to consider entering into an interlocal agreement that would provide $650,000 in funding for them on an annual basis. If we divided that amount using a population formula, Chapel Hill would be roughly $258,000. We also received a request to provide $273,000 to the partnership to support several positions, including the SORAD counselors. We'll go into details on that in just a moment. Council asked us to provide a few options for your consideration to either fully or partially meet those requests. Some of those options include possibly raising the general fund tax rate by 0.3 cents and also consider budget cuts, which we have as well. And to return, or another option would be to return to the council in the fall when we would have more substantial information about the request and use appropriated fund balance for those fiscal year 2023 contributions. So here's a look at the request that we've received from the partnership. We don't have a ton of details at this point for the IFC, but we do have some details. Actually, we'll get to that in a moment. I'm sorry. Wanted to highlight the total request and how we might be able to pay for those. The total request is $531,000. As I mentioned, one of the funding options could be increasing the general fund tax rate. That would be $287,000 that could go towards that. We could eliminate the vehicle replacement ad that we had in place. And then, of course, we could take the new funding, the $118,000. That gets us to a little over $500,000, and we feel we could probably work to get us to the $531,000. The staff could do that over the course of the next week or so to cover that. So let's go into details about the partnership request. Actually, I'm sorry, one other thing we wanted to highlight, some other funding that could be used. We have $38,000 that's committed to SORAD in this fiscal year for a position. That position was just recently hired, so we don't believe they're going to need that entire $38,000. So some of that could be moved to help cover the cost of the request. We also have $62,000 that's remaining in the Reimagining Community Safety Task Force funding that we had in this budget season. The council or the town could apply some of that funding from RICS to next year to help cover that. And then we could have discussions about utilizing some sort of excess fund balance next year to cover any other issues that may come up with RICS and the recommendations from the task force. And so we could also discuss with the council whether or not to consider all of the funding for next year, or possibly doing part of the funding for next year for both IFC and the partnership, and to work our way into at some point over the course of the next couple of years, meeting the full requests that have come in from both IFC and the partnership. Next slide. So we do have several different opportunities to talk to the council over the course of the next couple of weeks. We have our budget work session tonight and a work session on the 1st. And then we are coming to council on the 8th to discuss adoption and hopefully adopt the budget for next year. And council, if you would like us to keep one of these slides up to help you as part of this discussion, we certainly can do that for you as well. Just let us know. But we'll take any questions that you may have right now.
Okay. Why don't you bring us back to full screen and they can ask for one of the, because it's just hard to catch. I can't catch everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. So I do want to ask council to see, just to make sure we're thinking the same way. We don't vote in these meetings, but we do give thumbs up from time to time. I'd like to see your interest in getting a interlocal agreement for IFC. If you're in agreement with this, would you please put your thumbs up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is a majority. Okay. Were there concerns, Adam and Paris, that you had in having an interlocal agreement?
I don't have any concerns. I'm just being very cautious because of my
employee there. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Adam, did you have a concern?
And I'm fine with pursuing. I think we need to pursue an interlocal agreement, but I have a lot of questions about or a number of big questions about the allocation that I would.
No, and I just wanted to get through this.
So yeah, so I'm fine with, I think as part of this, as we move forward, that we need to pursue an interlocal agreement, but I don't want to. So that was, I just said.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to see if we were on the same page for that.
Yeah.
I had asked staff to take a look at what a tax increase with the county tax proposal would mean for certain range of homes and businesses. So you can see that, because we do know that when we give a tax increase, or the county gives a tax increase, it's actually passed on to renters and homeowners and businesses, and for you to understand what those numbers are. And sometimes, like I said, they're passed on unevenly, as if your lease comes up during the time when they're getting the bill until they pay it in January, you can get hit a little harder depending on how high it goes up. So I just want you to be aware of that and see those numbers so that you have an understanding. The county's proposing a 1.25, is that correct, Maurice? Tax increase?
Yes, 1.25 is what we
to go towards funding more per pupil. So just so you're aware, I don't think there's been a request to approve a higher school tax. I think that's been pretty steady. The commissioners have been pretty concerned that they not raise that number in case we're ever forced to do something different there. Anyway, so that's so that you're aware of what's going on overall. All right. I'm trying to think which category to start in, because I know we have lots of questions. And we're still getting information from the county on the two big ones I think we have concerns about. So do we want to start with the IFC request, Michael?
Yeah, maybe I can just kick it off with a question about the partnership, and the county funding. We saw some of the data this morning, which was very helpful to me. And I guess my question is, not to put it in delicately or anything, but should we choose, do we know what will happen? So they're requesting $273,000 from us. Should we choose to give them a different amount than that, obviously a lesser amount than that? What is our comfort level or our belief in terms of what the county will do to preserve or not preserve those positions?
Yeah, it's a good question that we don't have an answer to tonight for council. Aside from, as you may recall in the conversation that we had last week, Council Member Anderson mentioned that in the discussion with the partnership, at one point when they said, well, what happens if we can't provide this funding, they talked about the possibility of of laying folks off, because this funding would go towards funding current positions within their organization. But I have not heard that directly from Orange County at this point. That was just a part of the discussion with the partnership, and hope to get a clear answer on that soon.
I mean, it's a tricky one, because if they tell us that they're going to fund the positions anyway, obviously we have no incentive to fund them. So,
Well, so my understanding in talking to quite a few of them is that they funded these positions with grant monies and care monies, and that money has run out, or they could use ARPA, but that's not sustainable. We have been very supportive as a council of the SORAD positions. We see their effectiveness. We understand that. And I can understand us wanting to help fund those. Part of the problem too is if we gave, let's say we chose to give a lesser number, would they use it to fund other positions other than the SORAD positions and cut the SORAD? So we don't know enough to know what would happen with all that. And that's part of the frustration as well. And so it's a really interesting, this came late in the game. That's also part of the concern is how do you work this in? And I know it's, all these things are things we really value, but are they ready to take off and be managed in a way that's effective? And we don't know. I mean, SORAD, yes, we know, but the other ones, the partnerships executive committee hadn't even voted on some of this stuff yet. So it was it's a very interesting situation. Camille, I see your hand up, then Adam, then Karen.
Thanks. I did talk with County Commissioner James Sutta of, oh my gosh, James Sutta's Bedford today, and she shared with me, we're going to meet tomorrow, but she shared with me that they actually drafted a letter to send to electeds, and it's been approved by Barbara Fouché, Councilmember Barbara Fouché, Commissioner Kathleen Ferguson, and also James Sutta have all signed off on it. And as of this afternoon, around 3:30, they were waiting to hear from Jess Anderson, from our own council member, Jess Anderson. So as soon as she signs off, then we should know even more, which I'm looking forward to receiving.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I had Adam and Karen.
Yeah, just with regards to trying to anticipate what these other government entities are doing, it's pretty critical. Not only if we fund less, but also if we fund at the IFC request at the full amount, then what happens if, or at the amount that we are calculating based on our population, or he's just saying, what happens if these other entities don't fund the rest of it? Then are we on the hook for all that for the rest of it?
No.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that would be the expectation. I would imagine that I can't speak for either one of those organizations. I do know that one of the reasons that IFC has approached everyone is because they have been using reserve funding to help close their gaps in over the course of the last few years, and I know that they'd like to get away from that. But I do believe they still have some funding that could help cover some of those gaps, at least in the near term. And so if we were to say, yes, we're going to fund $258,000 or whatever that number is, and the other groups said no, they weren't going to do that in year one, I would imagine that they would utilize some of that reserve funding to cover the cost, but I don't know that for sure.
Well, that brings me to question number 2, because obviously that they could do that. They could use, I mean, I don't know what the reserve funds are, but they could do that. But in the questions that we got responses to, and in when we were, some of the folks from the board, I think, who were speaking, we're talking about a structural deficit they have. And obviously you do not, when that's not something you want as a nonprofit. And sometimes, but it's common, people get into that one. And I think probably what happened was they, like, government entities everywhere or other nonprofits, they wanted to build these new facilities that we needed and, and didn't anticipate the ongoing, operation costs. And obviously those costs are going up. So, fine, that's a situation that's common. But what I think we need to be very careful about is to make sure that there is a plan going forward that doesn't involve dipping back into reserves, that doesn't involve a continuing structural deficit. If we are going to suddenly up significantly our annual appropriation to the organization, which I'm, think is a great organization. But I think that if we're going to be devoting what I assume is recurring dollars and not one-time dollars, then I think we really need some sort of financial accountability plan from the organization that says, here's how we are going to move forward, so we don't come back to you in a year or two in the same boat because we didn't deal with this, this problem that we didn't have. We're not paying our expenses with we don't have enough revenues to pay our expenses. So, and that involves the other moving part is what happens with these other municipalities. Are they going to be contributing as well? Do we have an agreement where we can contribute? Because if you do that, then you can set up a much better and more stable financial accountability plan, to make sure that we don't get back into this, boat going forward. So I think for me, I really need to have answers to that and answers to what happens if other municipalities don't kick in. I mean, when you add up these additions to the tax rate or what we're giving, this suddenly becomes a very significant amount. I'm not saying I'm not, don't want to do it, but I'm saying I think we need a lot more answers here because we're talking about, amounts of money that can go to many other needs in our town. And people are asking us about, the safety lights around the schools. And, we're putting in the, exposed nails at the skate park. You knew I wasn't going to not mention that, but, so we have all these things, but I just would like those two main questions, I think for me are what I really want to answer before we move forward.
I would have been disappointed if the skate park didn't come up tonight, Councilman.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think you've raised some really good points, and unfortunately, with some of those answers may not come until we have an interlocal agreement negotiated, right? And so, but I think you've raised some really important points to bring forth in those discussions over an interlocal agreement in terms of the financial management in the future for IFC. So that's certainly on the list of things to talk about with them. We will reach out to our partners in our municipalities here in Orange County and have that discussion about what their expectations are. I will tell you that I've heard from some of the municipalities, and they've asked, well, what's Chapel Hill going to do? So we need to have that discussion, right? Exactly. We need to have that discussion and try to figure out, what's the best way forward. And I think once we have an understanding of how we're going to move forward, is to clearly communicate that to elected officials. Then you all can make the decision about what to do. We can provide you with some options, and then move forward from there. But really good points.
Okay, I have Karen, and then I see Councilmembers have their hands up again. So we'll let everyone else get a turn first, and then we'll come back around.
Yeah, thanks. Well, a couple things. First, just some updates on what other councils are doing. Last night, Carborough expressed support for funding the IFC interlocal agreement and the partnership expansion request. They haven't finalized it, but the council expressed support. And they vote on their budget in a few weeks the way we do. But they were at least in principle, supportive of both of those things. Hillsborough has, I don't know if they've finalized their budget, but they've expressed support for the partnership expansion, but not IFC right now. I think because of their funding restrictions around the water issue and stuff that we've talked about. So it sounds like there is at least in principle support to figure this out from all the municipalities. So that's really good news. I've also, similar to Camille, been having some conversations trying to understand what's going on. And, there's a lot of versions flying around, and I feel like we all agree, especially the partnership request did not come early enough, and there's a lot of conversation, but I think as Paris kind of articulated last meeting, I really hope we can get past sort of process and figure out, what our values are here and what we care about and what we want to fund, and then figure out, the right way, the responsible way, all of those things. So have a question and a comment. So I'll comment first, then I'll question. I'm supportive of finding a way to do this without an additional tax increase. I'd like the conversation earlier today about, between the leftover RICS funding, the affordable housing extra 80,000, some delays and vehicle replacement. That sounds like we'll probably have excess fund balance, so we could cover it differently. I feel like we could get where we need to be at least, and not necessarily the full amount. I don't think we need to fund, especially the full amount of the partnership request this year or this conversation, depending on how conversation happens over the summer and staff, an interjurisdictional discussion. There is ARPA funding if we decide, we get a better understanding of all of the positions. I think there's been a lot of expression of support for SORAD, and I do think, again, we need to confirm. It's my understanding we could say, we're giving this money for SORAD. We want to talk about the rest because we need to understand better why Chapel Hill would help fund it. And, I definitely want to understand that better. And I also heard that this letter is coming to us that explains that. So I'm eager to receive that. I haven't seen it yet. So I feel like we could do a significant amount towards IFC and at least SORAD without raising taxes, while we have the longer discussions that need to happen. And my question is, do we know for IFC how much the county funds IFC now, and if they're also being asked to fund more this budget cycle? I'm not sure I've heard that. Yeah.
I don't know what their funding levels are. We can certainly find that out. I think they are being asked to contribute to this as well. Once again, I don't believe there's a number that's been associated with that, simply because we don't know what the formula is going to be just yet. But if it is based on population, it would probably be slightly less than what we would be paying if in that $650,000 request.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Ty, did you have input, questions?
Is that on mute? Okay. No questions from me. I agree with Karen. I think the priority from the various partnership under the partnership umbrella for me is definitely SORAD. And then the IFC request is the other big priority. I know we also have ARPA funds. I know that, like Karen said, these requests came late, and I'm supportive of the three options laid at the RICS funding, the vehicle replacement delay, and then I'm forgetting the third one.
The new funding for affordable housing, the $118,000.
Yes, the extra $118,000, and that, if my math is correct, gets us there without the tax increase.
It gets us to about $268,600.
Maurice, are you counting the 50,000 that we were going to allocate to IFC this year already through the H?
No, we've gotten some clarity from that. We did ask IFC about that, and they said that's a different program.
Okay.
Their funding, and so they'd rather not apply that because it's for something different than their efforts on homelessness. I think it has to do with hunger and addressing.
Yeah, the other request is sheltering, so that makes sense. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. I see that Sarah Vinyas is on. Sarah, I know that you're very involved and you may have more information if you're willing to share with us. I know you're having a lot of discussions with the county staff and the other jurisdictions. Do you have anything you'd like to share with us or want us to know? Not all of us have had small group meetings yet, so I didn't know if there was something that you thought was worth putting out there right now.
Yeah, well, on that question, what Maurice shared is correct. The human services allocation that we have awarded IFC is for their food programs, and they've indicated that they do need to maintain that funding. And I'm happy to be available to any other specific questions that you'll have.
And I would add that if our number one focus with the new funding was to help support SORAD, I believe that's $126,000 to support that for next year. And so that would leave us with, based on what we just heard from council members, or Mayor Pro Tem Stegman and Councilmember Quinn, that would leave us with about $142,000 that you could allocate to IFC. Make that decision to go ahead and do that and start that process with the interlocal agreement, and we can continue that discussion. So just wanted to provide you with an update on the numbers.
Yeah, gotcha. And quick clarification, sorry if I missed this earlier. So the 531 was the total request, right, of all the jurisdictions?
That's correct. Well,
Gotcha.
no, 531 was the total request for both the partnership
just-
and IFC, for just Chapel Hill. If we know we have the
Gotcha.
273.
Okay. Yeah,
and
yeah.
then,
Minus the,
258
okay.
if it's based on population, and that would give you the 531.
Gotcha. So that's 258 for the IFC portion. And you just said that was 142 towards that?
That would be 142 towards that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Just making sure my math is correct. Gotcha. Thank you.
Camille, then Michael.
Thanks. Gee, I have to say that I had to sit forward in my seat when humor and bad taste was used to equate nails at the skate park when we're talking about housing for those who don't have shelter. Yeah, it was. And I would love for us to figure out how we can do this without increasing tax. And if we need to cut from other places, we can. And I don't think that they are asking for this money because they haven't been managing money well. I think they're asking for this money because they haven't had enough, and they have been asking year after year. I listened in on Carborough's meeting last night, and Jackie Jenks repeated to them what she shared with us just last week, that she came to us, they came to us year after year. And so this is not a new request. It's a newly articulated request. It's a newly refined request, but it is not new. And to suggest as such that it's because they're not managing their money well and because they're dipping into their reserves, thank goodness they have their reserves to do that, because the community has not been able to support them. Well, the governments have not been able to support them to do the work that we rely on them to do.
Okay, Mr. Michael.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe as a possible sort of next step. So, the manager has shared with us what's involved if we meet the full request, right? The 531, basically it's an additional 0.3 of a penny on the tax rate, plus a few other items moved around and so on. So that's sort of one option. Perhaps, and I don't know if we want to try to do it on the fly, or Maurice, could do it and then circulate it, and we could finalize things hopefully next week. But the other option would be, how much of the requests can we meet with no tax increase, and see what that looks like. And I think we've been sort of talking around it a bit, but I always get nervous when we do these things on the fly. But if we, do that, then I think it gives us at least 2 anchor points to think about. And then if we, feel that one or the other isn't enough, we could maybe, meet in the middle if it should come to that. But I'd be interested in seeing, if we do not add the 0.3, what does that give IFC? What does that, and particularly given that I think there is a pretty good consensus that we want to fully fund SORAD. So if we take those as anchor points, I think that would get us to a place where we'd be able to make a decision.
Ty had a question out there. Ty, it would depend on how much we allocate towards the partnership and homelessness.
Oh, sorry. I that was with the assumption that we were doing the SORAD piece only, because that seemed that
SORAD piece
that's
only.
what, yeah.
All right. I'm gonna make a couple of comments and I'll come back around. Yeah, I see there's ARPA money. The other place we do have money is in our fund balance overage, and it is, I won't say it's recurring, but it kind of is. We had an overage because we didn't spend as much as we had and we saved money. So I think instead of trying to solve this problem for the manager, he's got to figure out where to get it from. If we say we want to see the options with what we can do. I'm hearing a lot of support for the IFC funding to help. And I agree that they've had overwhelming need because the community has had an overwhelming need. There's been a lot with COVID, a lot with things just, I mean, now we've got inflation and we've got other things going, gas prices, things like that. I am personally concerned. I love the SORAD program. I'm concerned about some of the other positions and the unknowns. And I would rather our staff continue having discussions with Orange County before we set a number. And then for our staff to come back, the manager to come back with a number recommendation for the partnership that includes SORAD. I'm hearing a lot of support for that. And ways to get to that number. And maybe it is a phasing in for the rest. And maybe we decide the rest of the program is really good, but I don't think we're quite there yet. That's just my take on this as well. I'd prefer not to do a tax increase if at all possible, but you know, it may be the option we have to go with. And I'd prefer to find out other ways we can do this. These are reoccurring dollars. So we need to make sure that I don't want to fund them with one-time dollars like ARPA. I don't think that we just enter into the same discussion next year. So I don't think that's a good path forward. Adam, you had your hand up, and then Paris, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you just pointed this out at the end, but to me, these are recurring dollars. I mean, but we are talking about taking the money from things that are non-recurring. So in some instances, so these one-time, there were a couple one-time things I think you mentioned, Maurice. So I just want to be clear that that when we're talking about a fund, it's recurring. And then I'll just reiterate, I mean, I think getting more information, I'm absolutely 100% behind that in the partnership, yes. But I do think that if we are going to up our investment significantly in these organizations, that we do need, just based on their own responses to our questions, that we do need a little more information about how they are going to address the problem that brought them to us and the other governments going forward. So we just need some sort of plan, and I don't think that's unreasonable. I think it's, we're investing taxpayer dollars, and we need to make sure we're going to, that there's going to be at least some idea that we're not going to end up back here again in the same spot. So, but I'm totally for that. And final thing I'll say, I would hate the idea of any more tax increase than beyond the transit. I just think it's a wrong time. Gas is now, you can get $5 a gallon or something. It's real, people are going to be really hurting. So anyway.
Harris, then Michael.
Yeah, first, I just want to thank my colleagues, especially Councilmember Berry, for the comments that she's made, as well as Councilmember Stegman. Thank you all for that. I think it's important that we aren't playing ping pong here. I listened in, last night to Carborough. I've spoken to some commissioners regarding this funding. And so there's support for both of these initiatives. And I just want us to know that there's an easy way to get to this, so we're not playing ping pong. So I would really ask council members to do their due diligence. I sat and listened in, like to Councilmember Berry last night to Carborough and their support for these initiatives. And so we're waiting to hear, we don't need to wait. We need to be making some decisions. Thanks.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I am certainly in agreement with Adam about, having an interlocal agreement that addresses, financial controls, or whatever you want to call it. But I think let us not forget that the reason that they have this deficit is that they have been doing work that government should have been paying for and hasn't been paying for. It's really not because of mismanagement. It's not because they didn't know what they were getting into. It's because basically they should have been getting money from the government to do this. They are the only shelter in Orange County, and they have been getting almost no money from the government. And that's why they have this problem.
Karen?
Yeah, just a quick, one thing, just Adam, I would encourage you to reach out to Jackie. I talked to her about this and it was really helpful just to understand some of that history. I'm sure she'd be happy to meet with you.
Yeah, I've tried, I have, and I'll reach out again to her, and I've tried in the past to reach out to her, and we've just misconnected, and I'm happy. I would love to talk to her more about it. So yeah, I'll do that. So, thank
Okay.
you.
But I had another comment just also in terms of the history, just to remind everybody that, you know, we used to provide the Old Town Hall in kind as a donation. And once they moved, we didn't really kind of make up that donation. And they, you know, have the expenses of running multiple buildings and facilities. And so I kind of see that also as a reduction in our support once they moved out of Town Hall. So so I'm thinking about it that way too, of we've actually reduced our support to them for this, you know, critical services, Michael said.
Okay, so let me see if I can sum up and y'all can thumbs up or thumbs down. We are supportive of an interlocal agreement for IFC, and we are supportive of finding funding to go towards supporting those services. We are supportive of SORAD and the Partnership to End Homelessness. We do have a few more questions that we'd like the staff to delve into and come back to us with what other things we need to know. And we are going to ask the manager to come back with further options that don't include a tax increase or have other ways of doing that. I'm hearing you'd like to see if there's a way to find to make it work without doing a tax increase. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. All right. Were there any other things on the budget? I think we're getting close. Are there any other things on the operating budget that we wanted to discuss tonight or that you had questions about?
Council, one of the things that I would say, and the mayor referenced this earlier, it is any decisions that we make on one-time funding to cover this, whether it's excess fund balance or ARPA dollars, the bill will come due for that at some point. So if it's not this year that we're paying for it, we will pay for it next year. We have to at some point. So just wanted to point that out, that we've got to budget responsibly there, or we'll get ourselves in trouble down the road.
We have used fund balance in the past to balance our budget. So
no, and we do every year, and we're doing that again this year. It's built into our budget. We are a little uncomfortable with going a lot higher than we already have in our fund balance for this year. I think it's, Matt, and you can help me with this. I think it's like $2.6 million that we're already using in fund balance, expected fund balance for next year.
But that's
we
always
had
a placeholder.
7 million. Yeah, we had over 7 million
We did,
last
but that's
year, and
that's
we're going to have some this year, and so that number.
But that's
we
not
could tweak up.
guaranteed. As you remember, that 7 million. That when was the last time we had anything close to $7 million in excess fund balance? That was because we had a hiring freeze in place, and we had exceptional sales tax revenue, and we had budgeted that conservatively, right, into that year. So those are things that we just have to consider in the future.
But the reality is we almost never use the fund balance we budget in the budget. That's really a placeholder, and then it's made up through vacancies. And so even when we don't generate a surplus, we almost never actually dip into the fund balance.
Yeah, and it's not a as we've talked about several years ago, that's not the preferable way to balance budgets either.
No, it's not. It is an option, but it's not the preferable long-term solution. Agreed.
And so, wait, quick question or comment, I guess, then on that front. So at the next work session, it would be helpful for me at least to see, because I am kind of getting mixed where we're talking about one-time funding versus from the budget itself. So from my understanding, the sources we've talked about so far with the RICs and the other stuff came from the budget itself and not one-time funding. And then there's the 100 and whatever it was, 114, 116K left in gap. And we were talking about potentially using ARPA to fill that gap.
It's more than that. It's about $257,000 that we'd have to find in order to meet the full request for both the partnership and IFC.
Karen, you're shaking your head.
So I just didn't think we were talking about trying to find that full amount now.
Well, and that's the thing, we've heard different things from council, right? And so if we're looking at a phased approach, I think we're pretty close to that right now, if council's comfortable with that. But I've also heard some council members say that they'd like to fully fund it as well, or consider that. So that's where that gap would be. It's about, and I'm doing this on the fly, so and without a calculator, by the way. So I got about $257,000 or so, somewhere in that range of a gap. If council said, hey, we're going to do a phased in approach, and that's $126,000 for SORAD for the partnership, and then we'd have about $142,000 that could be left for IFC, at least as a first phase discussion. And then, if you decide you don't want to do the full funding right now, we could have a discussion about, and it would happen all at the same time or close to the same time next year, when we know what our excess fund balance is for this current fiscal year. Council could say, hey, we feel comfortable with this. We want to have an interlocal agreement done. We want to have a new MOU done with the partnership. Then at that point, council could say, well, we're not only are we going to take some excess fund balance for this current fiscal year, that would be 23 at the time, but we're making that commitment to include it in our budget for fiscal year 24, right? That's one way of phasing it in, and then possibly even fully funding their request for fiscal year 23.
Maurice, I think I heard a little differently from you. I heard that we were interested in full funding for IFC, but we had questions about the partnership to end homelessness full amount other than SORAD.
So then that would be the 126 for
plus IFC.
SORAD, and then 258 for IFC, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I was getting from council. They were very supportive of the full we want an interlocal agreement, and it would be hopefully administered in Sarah's department with all that stuff going on and worked out. But to be able to have, I mean, the sheltering is a huge need right now in this day and time. And I think that's what I was hearing from folks that saying, yes, Ty.
So just to clarify, because again, I'm still confused. So the options that you just laid out, Mayor Heminger, with the 126 for SORAD plus the full IFC amount, what we were talking about funding options for those, and the gapping that was left over was 114,000. Those funding options weren't one-time funding options though, right? And then, so the gap would then be the 116, and that's what we were talking about potentially using one-time funding for.
So
this year.
Of this year, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Based on my understanding of what we've talked about, and we can go back and double check these numbers, then we're talking about a gap of $116,000.
Yes.
And I want to point out too, that based on the information that we saw this morning, that let's say we were doing 140,000, but there's money that the IFC got from us over the past 2 years that's probably going away, because some of it was CARES Act money, some of it was CDB. I can never get that right.
CDBG, yeah.
Money that was one time. So it looks like, if we were to do, let's say 140, 150 for IFC, it looks like a big jump, but it would actually be only about 50,000 more than they got this year from the town, and money that they probably won't get next year from those sources. So I think we also need to keep that in mind when we finally come to whatever number we come to on the IFC. So if it's the full 258, it's not as big a lift as it's really a lift of 158, because they're probably going to lose about 100 that they've gotten.
I think you're confusing everybody, but I think we've heard support for the full funding for IFC. Yeah. Okay. And then you're going to have more discussion and figure out give us options for the partnership to end homelessness funding categories, both at full SORAD and then SORAD plus the other stuff, or phasing in the other stuff. And then if it's not preferred, but we do have an option to pull fund balance for this year for that gap. The vehicle replacement one isn't a one-time, it's the recurring vehicle plate replacement funding. But again, we've also used fund balance to do one-time vehicle purchases when needed. So again, not the preferred.
And I had already factored that into the funding.
I know, I saw it there. I just want people to make sure that wasn't a one-time thing. Right. That was to increase to restore the regular funding for vehicle replacement, which we do need to get to, but it might not be this year to do it as a recurring. This year might be fund balance overage, and then it goes next year we try to get into the recurring. So
Yeah.
Okay. I do want to remind council too that when I don't know if Maurice budgeted this way, but when we budget for new positions, normally because the budget gets passed later in June, those folks don't actually start on July 1st. It usually takes a little bit. So there's some excess money in there that goes back into the fund balance if they're not hired right away. But that should be interesting to watch, unless you only budgeted. I don't think you just budgeted for 10 or 9 months.
Yeah, we budgeted for the entire year.
Full amount. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, again, anyway. All right. Any other questions about the budget to discuss tonight in this work session? Any other components of the general fund? I will remind folks, we took some things out of the budget approval process to allow some flexibility and fast, like the parking rates and some of the other fees that are out there. Maurice, do you have an update on any of those that we're looking at or not looking at, or?
Not at this point, but we can provide an update to council at the next meeting if you'd like.
Okay. And have we seen that Human Services Advisory Board list?
I'm not sure if I think that was part of the budget, wasn't it? I thought it was sent along as part of the budget, but if not,
I've asked other colleagues and they don't remember seeing it. So could we get a copy of that too?
Absolutely.
I'll be honest with you. Part of the reason for asking is we do have 2 council people who have conflicts on that list. So we'll have to pull those items out separately to vote on June 8th. So we need to see that list because I don't know if we gave money to the organizations they're connected to. So that would be part of that as well. Okay. Other budgetary. We can't really be done by 8 o'clock, can we? That's just gonna hurt. Oh, look at that. I think we need to talk some more.
Michael about broke his neck there.
Okay. Well, we do appreciate Maurice, you and Matthew and Amy Owen and all the team that gets involved in trying to move things around for us. And it's been interesting. We haven't heard too much from our constituents about all this. We've heard a little bit, but not a whole lot. And it's confusing though, between general fund, enterprise funds, ARPA funds, over to fund balance. I think people get a little confused on how to deal with all this, but appreciate it.
A lot of moving
All right.
pieces for sure. Thank you, council, for your guidance tonight.
All right, council members, look for some updates about some things coming up. We'll try to get some more emails out to you tomorrow, but this meeting's adjourned. And so thank you all.
Have a good night. Thank you.
We'll see you
Thank you, y'all. I'm in disbelief. Happy hour time.
Okay.
Night, everyone.
Good night.